Hi everyone, this is Mrs. Parr, and on this episode of Math Up to Par, we are going to be talking about rounding decimals. So when we are rounding decimals, you are going to follow all the same rules you would when you round whole numbers. So I'm not going to go into too much detail about all the different strategies you can use for rounding. So I encourage you to watch my video on rounding whole numbers first, or having a firm understanding of rounding whole numbers before you try to round decimals. Because I won't be spending too much time on that today, but I will be talking about how to round numbers to different decimal places. And you'll find that if you know the rules for rounding whole numbers, that rounding decimals should be fairly simple for you. So you're going to basically underline the digit you're rounding to. Some of you circle it. However you identify it, you're going to look at the place you're rounding to. And then you're going to look to the right, okay? And the digit to the right is going to tell you whether that digit that you've underlined is going to increase or stay the same. That should say stay the same, not decrease, sorry. You'll be rounding to the nearest whole number, which is the ones place, the tens place, and the hundreds place. So the nearest, for this number, we're going to write this number. I'm going to write it 3 different times. Okay, so I've written it 3 different times, and that's because I'm going to round this same number to 3 different places. So the nearest whole number is the closest whole number to the decimal point, and the closest whole number to the decimal point is the ones place. So in this scenario, I'm going to be rounding to the ones place. I always look to the place to the right. This 4 is smaller than 5, which means that it's going to ask this number right here to stay the same. So this is going to stay a 7. And then everything to the left stays the same. Everything to the right turns into a 0. Well, I keep my decimal point and I change all of these to zeros. Well, remember when we talked about decimals in simplest form? Well, when they are in their simplest form, we do not need any extra zeros that come at the end after a decimal point. The ones that come before and in between are important, but not the ones at the very end. So we can actually take off all of these and just write 37. So the nearest whole number is 37. If I am then rounding it to the tenths place, I'm going to underline the tenths. I'm going to circle the 6, which is the digit to the right. And this 6 is going to tell my 4 to go up. It's going to go up to a 5. It's going to increase 1. Everything to the left stays the same, including the decimal point. That's very important that that doesn't disappear or run off and go hide somewhere. You have to keep the decimal point there, okay? And so then everything after would turn to zeros, like when we follow our rules for rounding whole numbers, but we know that in simplest form, you don't need the extra zeros at the end. So this would be 37.5, which is the same thing as 37 and, because that decimal means and, 37 and 5/10. So that is what this number would be rounded to the tenths place. Rounded to the hundredths place, I'm going to underline the hundredths place, which is the 6. I'm going to circle the digit to the left, which is the 2. Sorry. Okay. And that 2 is going to tell my 6 to stay the same because my 2 is not very high. It's less than 5. So I am going to have my 6 stay the same. Everything else, including my decimal point, stays the same before the number, and everything after turns into a 0 when I follow my other rules. But with a decimal, we don't need the extra zeros at the end, so we're going to take it off and we're going to put it in simplest form, which is 37.46, which is the same thing as 37 and 46 hundredths, because that last place value right there is in the hundredths place. So rounding decimals are just like rounding whole numbers. The only differences are you are dealing with parts that are smaller than 1. So when you have those extra zeros at the end, you don't need them to put them in simplest form. Okay, but you follow all the same rules that you do for rounding whole numbers. You're trying to find what it is closest to, because rounding is just such a useful skill for our everyday lives because we use it to find amounts that are close to something. So we don't always talk with the exact amount. All right, guys, thanks so much for listening and happy practicing. Bye.